have been saying, because common sense tells us, that if you target a population for taxation, there are people within that population who are going to move to avoid that taxation. That is just what happens. It's what happened after Washington State passed a tax on capital gains. And it's already happening in the state of California when it comes to a proposed tax on billionaires. This segment is brought to you in partnership with our friends at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org. Make sure you sign up for their newsletter to be alerted to opportunities to do just that. So this isn't a guess. This isn't conjecture. Again, this is what happens. And even Governor Gavin Newsom is admitting that if the proposed 5% one-time tax on billionaires in California passes, it's going to be an economic disaster, continue to be an economic disaster for the state of California. This from Fox Business. Newsom says California wealth tax is really damaging as billionaires move money and their businesses out of the state. And he is now trying to make sure that the wealth tax is defeated in November. Now, do I trust his motivations and that Gavin Newsom has suddenly come to his senses on overtaxation? No, I think he's trying to find a place for himself in the 2028 presidential contest. And he's right on this. And it's because they can't deny it because they're already seeing it. Several billionaires have already either moved businesses, moved assets, or moved themselves out of California when whispers of this wealth tax began. And that's just what happens. It's what happened when Washington passed its capital gains tax. So here's an interesting thing that happened last Friday in Olympia when I was down there asking questions of elected leaders. So they were asked essentially about the fears if a millionaire's tax passes in Washington state, that millionaires will just leave the state and then all this tax revenue that you think you're going to get, you're just not going to get. Here's the answer that Representative Travis Couture gave, a Republican, and listen to the stupid follow-up question asked by a captured reporter in the middle.
The capital flight costs us jobs, costs us innovation. I mean, we're a state built on innovation. We have a large tech sector that, does make incredible amounts of money, but then they turn that money around and give people six-figure jobs with 401ks and healthcare and benefits and everything else. So why would it affect, the rest of us?
Making $900,000 as opposed to $1 million, that's not going to wreck my life enough for me to leave the state if I like living in the state.
I don't think that matches with the evidence of what we see with people who are upset that would be subject to the tax are already thinking about moving out of this state. And similarly, moving out of California for similar things. And you know what? We're losing 48 taxpayers per day in Washington state. And while states like Florida are gaining somewhere like 400 or 500 taxpayers per day.
That reporter kept making this argument that, if I have $1 million and I get a 10% tax because I'm a millionaire, that doesn't change my lifestyle at all. He kept saying that over and over as if the only tax that exists on someone who makes $1 million is this possible 10% millionaire's tax. Of course, if you're making $1 million, you're already probably paying about $300,000 in federal taxes, not to mention all the other taxes at the state level. So if you add an additional 10% income tax on millionaires after that, it all adds up to the point where they're like, I'm just going to take my money elsewhere. And we see this happening. Now, Representative Tim Ormsby, the leading Democrat in the House on the budget issue, in terms of these concerns about capital flight, which are a very real thing, which are already happening in California, he says, what capital flight? There's no such thing.
I have no problem. I can look myself in the mirror and my constituents in the face if we're taxing a certain percentage of over $1 million. And as you pointed out, it is not going to change anyone's lifestyle at that level. I think the idea that we have capital flight, I have not seen any evidence of that whatsoever.
You have not? I'm sitting front row while he's saying that. He goes, I have not seen any evidence. And that was even before the headlines out of California, right? So to give him that, the headlines that started in earnest about billionaires leaving California over their billionaires tax proposal. But I'm sitting there and he's saying that, and my mouth's like, what? I was like, what do you mean? Because of course, I was thinking of the person who you're all thinking of, Jeff Bezos.
You said you've seen no evidence of tax flight or wealth flight Forbes estimates Jeff Bezos saved $954 million in capital gains taxes by moving to Florida. So what do you mean you've seen no evidence of tax flight?
That's one example, and I believe that if you unpack that, it was for personal reasons, not business reasons or dollar reasons. That's where he originated. He returned home. He built his wealth here in this state because of the infrastructure and ability and technical expertise that we have. My understanding is his situation was personal, not based on tax liability, but for personal reasons.
Yeah, that's why as soon as he left and moved to Florida, he sold a massive amount of Amazon stock and avoided, at this juncture, almost $1 billion in taxes that he would have had to pay us for the capital gains tax. If you believe he only did that for personal reasons, you need a medical exam on your brain. I mean, just crazy. And then how quickly he said, I haven't heard of any instances of capital flight. And I say, what about Jeff Bezos, who saved almost $1 billion? And he says, well, that's one. That's kind of a big one. Our state budget is roughly $78 billion a year, and he accounts for $1 billion in revenue that you expected that you did not get. I would say that's just that one? It's a pretty significant one. So we know capital flight is a real thing. We know it's even, Governor Newsom is saying it's a real thing in California, already happening there under threat of a billionaire tax. So millionaire tax in Washington state. The rich people are the people who can afford to move, and they do it. Even our friend Zach Abraham, I was talking to him yesterday with Bulwark Capital. He said if they pass the millionaire tax, he will find a way to move his business to domicile it elsewhere. So we already know there are people saying, yes, I will leave. Yes, I will move. Yes, I will move my business. And Democrats are like, no, they won't. No, they don't. They won't. And you're going to call their bluff? Even if you say, we changed our mind. Yeah, this has been really bad. A lot of millionaires left. We don't have any money anymore. Now we're going to have to tax the middle class anymore. We're sorry. Please come back. They're not coming back. When you take the steps to move your business, move your family out of a state over their tax policy, you're not just going to say, now they're acting friendly, so I'm going to move back. No, when you're gone, you're gone. And Washington state's budget crisis is going to get worse and worse and worse until they figure that out. That segment was brought to you in partnership with our friends at Future 42. Turn your frustration, there's so much frustration, into action at future42.org. Make sure you sign up for their newsletter to be alerted to opportunities to get involved in fighting for this state that we all love.